Imagine a bustling medieval town square, cobblestones echoing with the murmur of a gathering crowd. The air is thick with anticipation and a hint of iron, a scent marking the day, not as market, but of spectacle. Here, justice in the Middle Ages unfolded not behind closed doors, but in the open, where each punishment was a performance. Onlookers didn't just witness penance, they inhaled the fear, the clinking of chains a grim overture, the cries a sombre refrain. In this world, silence was rare, voices were stifled by leather and metal, and agony was the language of truth. Or perhaps a whispered warning. Medieval world, a place where justice was as much about performance as it was about punishment. In this age, justice was laid bare for all to witness, transforming town squares into stages where the harsh truths of human folly were acted out in full view. Here, solemnity merged with spectacle, offering both a grave societal function and a form of public entertainment. Unlike today's often insulated judicial proceedings, the enforcement of law during the Middle Ages relied heavily on visibility and community participation. Public punishments like executions, whippings, and brandings were stark and visceral lessons, not just in law, but in acceptable social conduct. The medieval mindset held that such public displays were vital to preventing chaos and upholding order. The gallows, often strategically positioned in the heart of town, became more than mere instruments for execution. They were critical focal points of civic life. As the condemned approached, the throngs gathered, their murmurs swelling in the air. Streets echoed with the ominous groaning of the gallows wood, while the hangman's rope whispered of impending fate. These sounds carried beyond the square, a sonic announcement as potent as any decree, surrounding the townsfolk in a web of communal awareness and unified dread. As the execution unfolded, a hush often settled over the crowd, a collective breath held tight before the fateful conclusion. The gallows at this moment transcended their role, serving as grimly poignant symbols of the state's uncompromising grip on life and law. In these chilling ceremonies, justice took on its most dramatic form, its reverence entwined with a tension that was part horror, part solemn spectacle. Divorced from the mundane, each event was drawn out, its ritualistic proceedings designed to etch lasting impact on the minds of all present. Beyond the gallows, humiliation served as another powerful tool, aiming directly at the spirit more than the body. Medieval societies often employed stocks and pillories, placing them conspicuously in bustling market squares. Here, those trapped within became unwilling attractions, enduring not just the discomfort of their positions, but the public's mockery, taunts and disdain. Stripped of dignity, the punished were marked as societal deviants, their shame displayed and shared, intended to reinforce the unwritten rules of the age. These public displays highlighted the divide between societal roles and responsibilities, cultivating a keen awareness of social boundaries. For those consigned to the stocks, the pain persisted long after physical freedom was restored, branding them with a figurative mark far more durable than any physical scar. Yet, beyond mere individual suffering, such spectacles served communal functions. They were necessary reminders, reinforcing the social hierarchy through both the spectacle's enactment and the crowd's responses. Central to these grim ceremonies stood the executioner, a character shrouded in both disdain and necessity. Though vital to the judicial process, the executioner's integration into society was fraught with ambivalence. A professional with a grim duty, he was both a crucial player on the medieval stage of justice and an outcast, living on the fringes due to the dark nature of his trade. Skilled in balancing the need for precision and the inherent brutality of his task, the executioner underscored the authority of the law with each carefully measured action. In medieval times, pain took on a communal dimension. Individual suffering held less significance than the community's interpretation of it. Each act of punishment served as a public announcement, a lived demonstration of the price of non-conformity. It reinforced a collective understanding of justice that anchored medieval social cohesion, threading through the hearts and minds of those gathered in shared relief or fear. This era's punishments were laden with purpose beyond vengeance. They were organised community happenings, intentionally curated to allow the ordinary citizen a direct window into legal adjudications. Thus, every whip slash and every hangman's noose formed an unspoken bond, intertwining state and populace in a shared acknowledgement of societal values. Underpinning this was the medieval legal mindset, where punishment acted as a standalone testament to communal ethics. Crimes weren't merely breaches of law, but perceived moral failings requiring public redress. To witness punishment was to understand the moral geography of the time, traced out vividly with each penalty meted. Beyond physicality, medieval punishments were richly symbolic. The tools of discipline, from gallows to branding irons, were outward expressions of the relentless reach and authority of the time. As grand spectacles designed both to captivate and admonish, they cast a firm line between lawful conformity and waywardness. In a society where formal schooling was sparse, public punishments offered a universal schooling in law and duty, albeit with an underlying note of grim amusement. This mix of instruction and entertainment added an emotional weight, turning each event into a public catharsis. For all their cruelty, these gatherings instructed and provided a macabre form of escape, indulging humanity's inexhaustible interest in fate and justice. Even as the Middle Ages slipped into history, the echoes of these public punishments can still ripple through time. While our justice systems have evolved beyond such displays, the shadows of these spectacles remain in modern discussions of penalty and law, a testament to the lingering influence of medieval practices. The event served as both a sober warning and a thought-provoking reflection on justice's enduring balance between necessary rigour and potential cruelty. Venture into this past, and you'll find tales that echo in present-day understandings, a reminder of justice's journey through the ages. In the shadowy intricacies of medieval life, words held power, and for women, their voices could mean peril. The scold's bridle emerged as a chilling symbol of the times, an apparatus designed not just to punish, but to suppress the very essence of communication. These were days steeped in superstition and patriarchy, where a woman's words were seen as potent and unruly forces, capable of upending the delicate social balance. The bridle was more than a mere device. It was an embodiment of control, a tool for silencing those whose tongues threatened the fragile male-dominated hierarchy. Constructed from cold iron, the scold's bridle encased a woman's head with brutal efficiency. A wrestling match of straps and locks strapped tightly, it featured an iron bit or spiked plate that pressed painfully against the tongue, rendering speech an exercise in agony. In some iterations, the bridle wore grotesque masks, adding an additional layer of public shame to its already cruel purpose. Consider the sensation: heavy iron weighing on your head, relentless pressure pressing down. Each attempt at sound met with searing pain, the world around you blurring into the jeers of townsfolk, a cacophony of scorn encasing your plight in a public theatre of humiliation. For the medieval community, Punishments weren't secluded affairs. Justice was rendered on the stage of public squares, where the spectacle of suffering served as a cautionary tale for all who watched. Women like Bessie Taylor, forced into a grotesque parade through her village, became living billboards for the societal dictum: speak out, and your shame will speak louder. As each step of their shamed procession unfolded, the collective gaze of the crowd didn't just witness justice, but, paradoxically, became voyeurs of the disorder it purported to mend. This dreadful relic wasn't confined to one land. Across Europe, from England to distant shores, variations like Scotland's brank, which often came with jingling bells to announce its presence, demonstrated a pan-European inclination to stifle female voices. These adaptations reflected each culture's penchant for cruelty, cloaked in moral and social righteousness. Yet, despite the variations, the grim aim remained clear: suppress those deemed dangerous under the relentless wheel of authority. Beneath the dark iron and shame, the scold's bridle symbolised something deep-rooted and systemic, a stark reflection of medieval gender dynamics. Women were subservient not just by social expectation, but by the entrenched doctrines of the era. Male authority reigned supreme, and the bridle merely echoed larger ideologies that labelled women as temptresses and deceivers, entities seducing society into chaos, narratives well trodden by the feet of religious dictums and cultural myths. Stories whisper through the corridors of time, accounts of those who bore the bridle's weight, leaving marks beyond the physical on their souls. For these women, there lay a long road of stigma, an unshakable shadow cast over their lives. The iron came off, but the societal chains often did not, binding them to reputations beyond reclamation. For what was the bridle if not a continuous sentence? A reminder etched into every glance from a neighbour, every whispered judgment that lingered long after the ordeal concluded. Ironically, the tool that courts deemed necessary to dispel chaos often fueled further discord, setting tongues wagging anew with each public display. By attempting to enforce harmony through brutality and subjugation, the society only propagated the very disorder they sought to eradicate. Painfully evident was the paradox of a culture bent on curbing vocal dissent with instruments that, in their brutal imposition, invited rebellion, silent perhaps, but no less pervasive. As we cast our eyes back through the mists of time, the scold's bridle stands as a grim emblem, a lesson etched in iron about the dangers of silencing voices. Though the bridle itself has vanished into the annals of history, its legacy echoes a cautionary tale, urging vigilance against the encroachments of suppression that linger in modern guises. Recognizing the pain and resilience of these stories should stir us to guard fiercely the advances toward gender equity and freedom of expression, hard won over centuries. In studying these chilling tales, we arm ourselves for a fairer present and future, ever aware of the shadows just a breath away from the bright light of rights and voice. In the heart of the medieval era, justice and divinity were so deeply entwined that it was often difficult to discern where one ended and the other began. The supernatural realm felt as tangible as the earth beneath their feet, and people turned to God's judgment to resolve disputes too fraught for human hands. In a world devoid of forensic evidence, the trial by ordeal stood as the divine litmus test, an intimidating and often terrifying ceremony. These ordeals were not the defendant's choice, but rather a sentence, dictated by earthly judges, fervently placing their faith in celestial intervention. Participation in these trials was not merely a test of will, but a testament of faith. People believed earnestly that the hand of the Almighty was invisibly present, shifting the scales of fate. The effect was a communal spectacle, with villages gathering to witness what they perceived as God's justice unfolding before them. To survive an ordeal unscathed was to wear innocence like a divine cloak, a proclamation no mortal could contest. Among these trials, the ordeal of fire was perhaps the most fearsome. The accused might carry a red-hot iron or walk barefoot across glowing embers. Flames danced wickedly, promising either salvation or damnation. Medieval minds believed divine protection would shelter the innocent from harm, leaving the guilty singed by their own misdeeds. Monks and priests presided over these rituals, their chants wrapping the ominous event in a shroud of ecclesiastical authority, invoking God to reveal his truth. The searing ritual offered a gruesome spectacle, yet reinforced the church's omnipresent role in medieval daily life. In stark contrast, water, typically a symbol of purity, became a vessel for divine condemnation. Here, the accused were lowered into water, bound and often weighted down, their guilt determined by the whim of buoyancy. Floating was a sign of guilt, sinking of innocence, although drowning had no bearing on their ultimate divine verdict. Watery trials unfolded with grave ceremony, clergy blessing the water as an arbiter of holy justice. These ceremonies were hauntingly paradoxical, with innocence won at such perilous risk, leaving communities with a sense of disquiet. Trial by combat presented a clash of chivalric ideals and judicial practices, where strength and skill might secure one's fate. It was a duel where God was the unseen judge, seeing valour as a sign of innocence. This ordeal offered visual drama as spectators watched a spectacle unfold, seeing it as the divine pageant rather than mere violence. The duels reflected the era's appreciation of valour and fealty, marking the winner not just with survival but as sanctified by divine favour. After an ordeal, the healing process was itself a divine pronouncement. Recovery from such trials was closely monitored, with monks tending wounds and interpreting their healing through a spiritual lens. Festering wounds were seen as whispers of guilt, while clean recovery spoke of heavenly favour. Monastic knowledge blended earthy medicine with spiritual rituals, reinforcing their pivotal role in interpreting God's will through healing. This curious amalgamation of faith and medicine underscored the power of belief over rational thought in medieval times. Through these ordeals, monks served as the keepers of divine wisdom. Their presence lent gravitas to the spectacle, a bridge between human and divine, as they guided communities in interpreting the outcomes. Their authority in these matters not only reinforced the ecclesiastical hold on justice, but also reflected their integral place within society, shaping spiritual and temporal outlooks in profound and often chilling ways. Surviving an ordeal turned individuals into local legends, a testament to resistance and divine favour. Survivors were seen not just as lucky, but as divine emissaries, their survival adding to the community's folklore. In the shadow of such trials, villagers found a mix of awe and jealousy, as these individuals stitched their tales into the town's collective consciousness. Community engagement in these trials cannot be understated. The ordeal was a public affair, bonding townsfolk through shared awe and dread. It was a ritual that reaffirmed social bonds under the communal gaze of divine justice. Such gatherings were more than grim spectacles. They were profound societal rituals, knitting villagers together through shared experiences. Though disturbing today, these events were essential pieces of medieval communal life, embodying the complex relationship between faith, justice, and society. Yet the legacy of such trials is complex. surviving or failing an ordeal marked individuals permanently, with whispers of doubt lingering long after the trial. Despite the Church's attempts to alleviate scars with spiritual healing, the outcomes were often fraught with ambiguity. These disturbing echoes of divine justice have persisted through time, haunting our understanding of medieval life and challenging our perceptions of faith and rationality. Trial by ordeal serves as a grim reminder of an era dominated by divine justice, echoing through history as both a testament to human imagination and a cautionary reflection on our journey from superstition to reason. In the shadowy depths of medieval dungeons, the iron chair and pair of anguish loomed as menacing instruments of torment. The iron chair, with its unforgiving metal frame, was embedded with sharp spikes that pierced flesh with even the slightest touch. Once a poor soul was bound to it, the torture began slowly, sometimes with the added misery of heat from burning coals below. The heat seeping through metal and into the skin was an agonizing companion to the already insufferable spikes digging in. The intention was clear: to fracture the spirit, to extract truth, or something resembling it, from whispered confessions born of desperation. This machine of anguish, with its cruel design, was a masterpiece of suffering, a testament to human ingenuity twisted into sheer terror. Equally dreadful was the pair of anguish. Deceptively innocuous in name, it was a device of pure malice. It looked like a metal fruit, but once inserted into a victim's mouth, or worse, its true nature emerged. With a turn of the screw, it expanded mercilessly, tearing soft tissues with precise, unstoppable force. This grotesque mechanism was a psychological weapon as much as a physical one, breaking the mind even as it broke the body. The rationale behind such crude instruments echoed a medieval belief that excruciating pain might sift the soul, separating lies from truth, as one might sift grain from chaff. This was medieval justice, not merely adjudicating crime, but transforming punishment into a harrowing display of power, etched in screams and suffering. Devices like the iron chair and the pair of anguish were not just torture tools, but windows into the era's mindset. Society clung to the conviction that pain had purifying powers, a belief rooted in religious fervour, where confessing, even falsely, might cleanse the soul. The torturer, wielding these devices, saw themselves not as agents of cruelty, but as craftsmen of truth, sculpting confessions from silence with methodical torment. There existed a flawed logic here, suggesting that innocence would prevail in quiet suffering, while guilt would crumble under the pressure of unbearable pain. In practice, however, it was often the powerful wielding these tools to maintain their dominance, reinforcing a social order where privilege shielded some from such fates, and the poor bore their brunt. Torture was spectacle, a grisly theatre where the boundaries of justice and entertainment blurred. Townsfolk gathered for these spectacles like a morbid audience, drawn by tales of pain that transformed abstract concepts of morality into visceral realities. Here the iron chair became a dark prop, the pair of anguish a cruel plot point, as society narrated tales of sin and redemption through the medium of suffering flesh. These events served to bind communities under shared values of fear and obedience, yet whispers of dissent often thrived unspoken, discontent rippling beneath the surface of piety and order. Intrigue hovered around these devices, a blend of legend and reality. Over time, stories, some true, others embellished, painted the iron chair and the pair of anguish as mythic objects, imbued with a power that transcended their physical form. They became symbols of the era's darker instincts, embodying the fine line between real horrors and the exaggerated tales spun by fearful imaginations. In this way, they were not just tools, but rather ghostly echoes of a time when pain was a narrative woven into the fabric of daily life. Fables passed down as warnings against straying beyond society's strict boundaries. The engineering behind these devices, often barbarically efficient, spoke to a chilling precision. The iron chair's spikes were arranged for maximum discomfort, adjustable to prolonged torment. Heat was a secondary, insidious force grazing the skin until terror numbed the senses. The pear of anguish, with its expanding metal petals, was a marvel of malevolent design, aimed at inflicting the most intimate pain. Each turn of the screw unfolded its intricacies, hinting at a twisted genius behind human suffering. These instruments were masterpieces in their macabre simplicity, constructed by artisans whose mastery lay in inflicting agony skillfully. In the medieval theatre of pain, torturer and tortured were locked in a grim waltz. The torturer, a figure of dread, was practiced in the language of distress, delivering pain with practiced ease. Detached, yet keenly aware of their role, these individuals played an unsettling part, narrating tales of sin with iron and fire. Meanwhile, the tortured personified suffering, their bodies becoming involuntary storytellers in agony. They were unwilling participants, yet crucial to the enactment of a narrative that underscored society's norms, becoming vessels of silent protest against the very mechanisms designed to break them. Ultimately, devices like the iron chair and the pear of anguish served not only as implements of pain, but also as instruments that narrated the era's tensions. They represented a battle with nonconformity, punishing those who diverged from the established order. These tales of deviance mingled subversively with the terror inflicted by the torturer's hands, revealing the underlying order an anxious society desperately maintained. Thus, within their malevolence, these devices told stories of cruelty and control, of human resilience and suffering, each tale a thread in the complex tapestry of medieval life. Flaying. The very word sent shivers down the spine in medieval times, a grim reminder of the thin veneer separating human from raw vulnerability. This was no mere punishment. It was a public performance of terror, crafted from flesh and bone. Stripping away the skin, the body's primary protective layer, was to render a person completely defenseless, a living canvas of excruciating pain. Such spectacles were designed not just to expel perceived betrayal, but to enforce societal order, a ritual that mirrored divine wrath, where repentance was deemed an essential passage to salvation. In the medieval mind, these brutal acts did more than serve justice. They reflected the cleansing force of divine retribution, transforming human cruelty into a twisted form of redemption. Reserved for those who committed the gravest of betrayals, flaying was a punishment as rare as it was ruthless. To betray a king, family, or community was considered a sin beyond measure. The victim's agonized cries served as a stark reminder that loyalty outweighed even life itself. Flaying was sometimes a slow process, executed in deliberate stages, each layer methodically peeled away as bystanders absorbed the horror. This was more than a gruesome spectacle. It was a chilling form of propaganda. By embedding fear deep within the psyche of the community, medieval authorities crafted a visual narrative of betrayal's cost, stripping away not just one's skin, but their very identity and humanity. This served not only to punish the individual but to sear a psychological scar into the collective memory, ensuring allegiance to the ties that bound their fragile society. In this macabre theatre, the executioner assumed a role both remarkable and feared. It was a trade passed down or acquired through sheer necessity, requiring not just brute force, but an unnerving precision and expertise in anatomy. The executioner's tools, frighteningly sharp blades, hooks for gripping and tearing, and instruments designed to separate skin from muscle, were part of his morbid craft. Flaying demanded more than strength. It was an art form, slowly unmaking a person, both physically and spiritually. Each cut was a grim reminder to all of the spectators' dread, echoing the fate that awaited any who dared challenge the societal order. Though often reviled, executioners wielded a peculiar kind of power and respect. Their skills were essential in maintaining societal norms, serving as living embodiments of the law's harshest face. Despite existing on the periphery of social acceptance, their presence was vital, reminding villagers of the harsh realities that unravelled where betrayal overtook loyalty. This anomaly highlighted the blurred line between societal norms and the raw enforcement of them, revealing the executioner as both pariah and protector of the social fabric. In the intricate weave of medieval life, justice and vengeance were often indistinguishable, merging personal vendettas with public cruelty. Flaying in particular became enmeshed in political intrigue, where personal grudges masqueraded as public duty. While heralded as punishment for severe treachery, flaying was sometimes exploited to settle personal scores. Behind this overt theatre of justice lay whispered accusations and simmering rivalries, where power struggles could dictate who met the executioner's blade. Public flaying events served double duty as political manoeuvres and societal commentary, with those in power shaping narratives of infamy for their adversaries. In marketplaces and town squares, the distinction between justice and revenge blurred. The fate of the condemned, often dictated by spite as much as by crime, played out in the shadows of whispered enmity, revealing the community's underlying fears. Observers weren't passive in this drama. They were central, witnessing the vile consequences of unchecked betrayal. Public participation underscored the precarious line between authority and anarchy, where skin itself became a potent symbol in the quest for influence and power. The tales of those flayed alive linger long after the screams, echoing down through generations. Raynor Leigel, a Norman knight, remains enshrined in history as a victim of this brutal end, accused of betrayal against his liege. His skinless form bore silent witness to the unforgiving nature of loyalty within the feudal hierarchy, a ghastly mural warning against treachery. His story transcends the horror of his demise, illustrating the fragile web of power, where a knight's life was inseparable from a lord's favour. These stories offer insight into individuals trapped in the merciless jaws of medieval justice, highlighting their complex interplay with the power dynamics of their time. Often the line between legend and fact blurred further, deepening the impact of these tales on collective memory. Another account, perhaps exaggerated but rooted in real fear, tells of a priest, not just flayed for his supposed sacrilege, but for the intricate political forces tangled in his clerical robes. His nameless tale became a testament to divine and noble authority, illustrating the personal cost of political gamesmanship. These narratives reverberate beyond the pages of history, their implications clear. The medieval world was undeniably grim, its justice system a cautionary tale for a populace caught in a relentless loop of power and mistrust. In the medieval period, the boundary between human and animal was as blurred as the smoke lingering in a bustling village square. Animals were integral to human existence, shadowing farmers in fields, ferrying goods, and sharing hearths. With this intimate bond, it wasn't uncommon for animals to be hauled into the human realm of laws and justice. Picture a scene: pigs, roosters, even insects, entering courtrooms charged with curious crimes that seem straight out of a twisted fairy tale. These trials, more than mere relics of superstition or whimsy, mirrored a medieval worldview where justice extended its reach to all creatures, wildlife included. The logic for these strange proceedings was rooted in dual beliefs. First, animals were considered capable of intent and morality, influenced by malevolent forces warranting human intervention. Second, these trials served a communal function, channeling collective grief and anger into a structured act of justice, bringing a semblance of order from chaos following inexplicable misfortunes like poor harvests or the loss of a child. Pigs, for example, could end up in the docks accused of harm, treated with the same gravitas as human defendants. Imagine a tribunal where a pig, perhaps shackled to enhance its humility, faces a judge and jury. Attorneys lay out their case, witnesses are called, and the community gathers to witness justice in action. Such events were neither a farce nor a jest, but rather a reflection of medieval systems striving for a parity of process. Pigs often faced sentences of hanging or burning, with crowds jostling to catch a glimpse of the unfolding drama. Yet not all stories ended in grim finales. Clerical figures sometimes intervened, navigating the Byzantine legal labyrinth to secure pardons. These interventions underscored the omnipresent influence of the Church, showcasing the entwined nature of law and religion, and often shifting blame from the animal to ethereal demonic forces. Roosters sometimes stood accused of peculiarities such as laying eggs, which villagers saw as the work of dark witchcraft. Such cases were not taken lightly, as the dreaded basilisk, a creature born from a rooster's egg, was reputed to bring catastrophe with a mere glance. The ritualistic execution of these birds was both a spectacle and a buttress against the dark arts, a decisive act in a world rich with superstition and fear. These trials, featuring burning stakes and prayer-laden proceedings, illustrate an age grappling with nature's mysteries, seeking control through rites blending folklore with judicial authority. While disturbing, these animal trials offered community catharsis. In village squares, under grey, smoke-filled skies, public gatherings for trials became rites of passage, where shared suffering found an outlet, a collective nod to the harshness of medieval life. The act of trialling an animal offered residents a sense of newfound control over turbulent events, converting chaos into narrative. Taking a step back from personal narratives, the perceived crimes of animals oscillated between folk tales and the sagas of medieval reality. Such stories were quick to catch fire, cycling through oral traditions and local chronicles, mingling with medieval conceptions of the supernatural. This narrative practice allowed societies to ascribe meaning to the seemingly random, wrapping chaotic events in the fabric of traditional storytelling. Spectacle played a key role in these proceedings. Townsfolk gathered to witness a society's moral compass on display, where justice appeared to muster both divine and terrestrial might. Unlike clandestine acts of judgment, these trials were public theatre, invoked as much for their societal affirmation as for the law itself. They punctuated medieval lives with tales both strange and instructional, weaving entertainment and didacticism into a single thread. As we draw back the curtain on these bizarre yet telling aspects of medieval justice, we're reminded of humanity's age-old quest for meaning amidst life's unpredictability. Such trials, absurd yet revealing, beckon us to approach history with empathetic curiosity rather than judgment. By looking at these past attempts with a discerning lens, we glimpse how far we've come while acknowledging threads of consistency in the human condition. If this strange slice of medieval life stirred your curiosity, or your stomach, give us a like. And if you're hungry for more gritty tales from the dark side of history, subscribe to Medieval Grime. We serve our history smoked, salted, and a little bit cheeky. Thanks for watching. Stay grimy and we'll see you next time by the fire. In the grim theatre of medieval punishment, the breaking wheel, known also as the Catherine wheel, was a prominent player. It was simple in construction, a large wooden frame with iron rims intended to prolong suffering and death. Its origins can be traced back to ancient Greece and Rome, yet it found its notorious place in medieval Europe as a tool for punishing offences deemed most severe, such as robbery, murder, and treason. The wheel was not merely an instrument of death, it was a symbol, one that conveyed the justice system's might, epitomising a society where fear maintained order. Public executions on the wheel were grim spectacles, drawing crowds to town squares like moths to a flame. Picture villagers gathered around, perhaps with vendors selling snacks to feed spectators who came to witness the day's grim entertainment. The condemned, strapped spread-eagle to the wheel, awaited the misery that would unfold. Each crack of bone under the iron bar was a reminder of the authority that dictated life and death. What made these executions uniquely medieval was the theatrical balance of justice and entertainment, a blend that made this method an instrument of psychological warfare as much as physical punishment. Though its roots were older, the wheel truly thrived as a medieval mainstay, representing a period when punishment ceremonies were as integral as religious rites. Kings and courts wielded the wheel, not only for criminal retribution but as political theatre, a display of power where guilt and innocence sometimes hinged upon social standing rather than deeds. Yet the device also bore the weight of legend, as in the myth of Saint Catherine of Alexandria, who was said to have survived a wheel execution by divine intervention, leaving the wheel shattered. Such tales cast the wheel in a light of divine retribution, reflecting a period when earthly justice tangled with the celestial. The process itself was engineered to maximize suffering. Secured to the wheel's cross-laden spokes, the victim faced strikes aimed precisely to break bones, while sparing vital organs, thus drawing out agony over hours or even days. As bones fractured, each sickening snap echoed amid gasps from the crowd. Often the wheel was elevated, presenting the broken body like a grim art installation. This wasn't just about death, it was about illustrating the fragility of humanity and the supremacy of authority. Birds would circle overhead, drawn by the promise of fresh carrion, as the crowd's muted murmur underscored the sinister dance of justice, spun from wood and iron. In this tableau of punishment, the executioner occupied a unique niche. Feared but essential, executioners were skilled craftsmen of death. The precision required in breaking a body without hastening death demanded experience. A botched job could invoke public ire. Often shunned by society, yet respected for their grim craft, some executioners built familial legacies, fathers passing the macabre trade to sons. Despite their reputation, executioners sometimes gained a twisted respect for their artistry. traversing the space between justice and grotesque spectacle with a showmanship that preserved the ritual's integrity. The wheel's terror extended beyond the individual, casting an indelible mark on medieval society's collective psyche. As a tool of fear, it showcased the terrifying capabilities of those who held power. Each execution served as a chilling memento mori, urging society to adhere to the legal and divine order. These spectacles represented the medieval equivalent of today's headline news broadcasts, ingraining a vivid cultural mythology of justice that exemplified the consequences of transgression. Yet, the moral underpinnings of such a punishment posed eternal questions. In a time when justice equated to pain, the wheel sparked debate over humanity's role in divine judgment. Was it right to use terror to enforce order? And could such brutal methods achieve true peace? Even in its day, some empathetic individuals questioned the wheel's morality, condemning its cruelty as inhumane. Their voices, though often muted by prevailing powers, hinted at an inner moral conflict extending beyond their era, probing at the nature of justice and human rights long before those concepts solidified into widespread discourse. Geographically, the wheel's use varied. France employed cartwheels, while Germany's setup was more elaborate. Some regions embraced additional cruelty, propping broken bodies on stakes, as if knitting human suffering into the very fabric of the land. Each adaptation reflected regional values, whether influenced by lingering pagan customs or Roman execution methods, creating a patchwork of justice that spoke volumes about societal norms amidst shifting powers. The wheel also spun itself into legend, tales whispering of spirits haunting places where the condemned had suffered unjustly. Such ghost stories suggested a cultural reckoning with justice and the afterlife, embedding the wheel into legends enduring through generations as haunting reminders of humanity's dark past. Eventually, Enlightenment thinkers and judicial reforms led to the wheel's decline. By the 18th century, philosophers like Cesare Beccaria advocated for rational justice, and public sentiment shifted towards humane treatment and away from such barbarity. As law evolved, the wheel was increasingly viewed as a relic, its gruesome spectacles deemed ineffective as deterrents in enlightened society. The phasing out of the wheel marked progress toward modern justice systems, where reformation replaced retribution. Though confined to history, the wheel's psychological legacy endures, compelling us to reflect on past and present notions of justice. A reminder of a time when fear ruled, it invites introspection on humanity's struggles with authority, morality, and empathy. A haunting artifact from a world where justice spun on the rim of a wooden wheel. In the bustling town squares of the Middle Ages, justice was a public affair, a vital part of maintaining societal norms. The act of punishing was not just about causing pain, but ensuring that it was witnessed by all, reinforcing communal boundaries through a theatre of morality. The image of a disgraced individual, humiliated before their peers, served as a powerful deterrent to anyone who might contemplate stepping out of line. This sense of spectacle was crucial, turning what could have been private penalties into grand public statements about community values and expectations. Among these public punishments was the notorious drunkard's cloak. Imagine seeing someone stagger down the street, awkwardly contained within a barrel. This punishment was designed not just for physical discomfort, but as an unmissable sign of disgrace. It turned the wearer into a living lesson on the perils of excessive drinking, a reminder that sobriety was a virtue, and those who overindulge endangered the social order. For the condemned, the familiar townscape became a hostile arena, filled with jeers and mocking laughter that drove home the lesson of their transgression. This was paralleled by the flute of shame, a medieval contrivance fabricated to mock singers and musicians who offended through misperformance or dissonance. Shaped like a flute, this iron mask trapped its bearer in an ironic silence, parade ready through market streets amid the heckles of onlookers. It was both instrument and incarceration, a silent admonishment ringing louder than distorted notes ever could. Within the containment of this mask, offenders endured an eerie solitude, a duel of irony and identity played out in unwelcome quietude. Class differences added another layer to these punishments. While peasants and common folk often bore the brunt and ridicule of public humiliation, nobles typically manoeuvred through more discreet channels, their transgressions hush-hushed by wealth and influence. The poor became both actors and audience in a morality play dictated by rank, where their suffering reinforced societal hierarchies. Yet, the relentless public eye fed upon these moments, grinding individual shame into broader narratives that shored up medieval social structures. The psychological impact of such punishments was profound. While physical pain could be fleeting, the mental scar of being publicly derided remained long after faces in the crowd morphed back into neighbours and patrons. In a time when pride and honour were lifelines to personal dignity, the public stripping away of these attributes struck deep. The offender's disgrace was a spectator sport, each humiliation witnessed by familiar eyes that would remember long past the punishment's end. Memories of humiliation haunted daily life. Each glance from a neighbour, a potential reminder of past disgrace. Yet, for the broader community, these punishments were an unlikely form of entertainment. In an era devoid of modern distractions, the town's square offered drama, conflict, and resolution in live action. The townsfolk gathered, not just to see justice meted out, but to savour the temporary breaks these spectacles provided from laborious routines. These events were cathartic, transforming shared curiosity about somebody else's misfortune into communal stories that persisted long after the cobblestones emptied. Despite the oppressive reach of these rituals, human ingenuity found ways to resist. Some roughed up the system, slipping guards a few coins or fleeing under the cover of disguises and darkness. These defiant tales circulated in whispers, telling of daring escapades that undercut the firm grip of authority. It demonstrated that the human spirit yearns for dignity and survival, even in conditions designed to humiliate and constrain. The role of the community in enforcing the shame underscores the collective power and complicity within these public judgments. Each insult, laugh, or glance contributed to the effectiveness of the punishment. Without this participation, the stigma would lose its sting. Yet community sentiment could sway, as empathy, or an understanding of shared humanity, occasionally softened the harshness of communal enforcement. Despite this, the presence of witnesses was crucial. The weight of shame was measured by the multitude who observed, reinforced by shared tales of the condemned's journey through disgrace. Ultimately, medieval punishments were riddled with ironies and contradictions. Devices meant to enforce order sometimes sowed seeds of dissent, their theatrical flair an unintentional invitation to question justice itself. The absurdity of a drunkard dressed in a barrel or a musician, gagged silent under an iron flute, highlights the nuanced interplay of civilization's attempt to control human nature through spectacle. Their peculiar duality, simultaneously oppressive yet intriguing, offers a fascinating lens into an age defined by desperate attempts at order. As we revisit these bizarre legacies, we are at once amused and horrified at the darkness intertwined with human history. The drunkard's cloak and similar spectacles unveil a past where culture and chaos danced uneasily. These stories pass through time as eerie echoes, urging a deeper reflection on the societal values that once shaped law and order. From mistaken steps and cages of iron, the medieval world offers a haunting panorama, reminding us of humanity's eternal dance with judgment and redemption. In the annals of medieval punishments, being hanged, drawn and quartered stands as the ultimate testament to the era's brutal ingenuity. Far from a simple execution, it marked the most heinous crime of all: treason. During these early times, treason was seen as the most egregious betrayal, not only against rulers, but the very order of society itself. This punishment was born not out of necessity alone, but out of the need to instill profound fear. It was less about justice and more about psychological warfare. An elaborate, gruesome spectacle, it served as a dire warning to anyone daring to destabilise the realm. The lurid origins of this punishment trace back to the reign of King Henry III, but it blossomed into infamy under King Edward I. He wielded it ruthlessly against Welsh nationalists and later Scottish rebels, turning execution into an unforgettable performance. By ensuring a traitor's sustained suffering, the punishment was meant to obliterate them thoroughly, erasing all traces of their identity. The ritual began with the condemned being dragged face down to the execution site, often by horse or cart, a journey imbued with humiliation. This part of the punishment, known as drawing, signified status reduced to dirt. The sight of the traitor, bound and powerless, moving slowly through throngs of townsfolk, turned the streets into a theatre of derision and despair. Once the destination was reached, horror truly commenced. The prisoner would be hanged just shy of death, choking on the brink of unconsciousness. But death was not permitted to grant its release so soon. After the hanging came disembowelment, often while the unfortunate soul remained alive. Burning the entrails before the convict's eyes was standard, a wicked dance between life and decay, intended to sear the memory into the spectators' minds. Destruction of bodily integrity continued with beheading, a barbarity aiming not only at death but erasure of legacy. This ruthless fragmentation proceeded with the quartering, the chopping of limbs severing the human form into mere parts destined for public display. These remains dispatched throughout the realm spoke viscerally to the populace. Treason is not only futile, but obliterating. Gates and bridges, everyday backdrops for medieval life, became macabre galleries bearing witness to the cost of defiance. This division of the body was a psychological punishment as well, magnifying the reach of the execution's terror. Chroniclers of the time, those like Matthew Paris, etched these stories into history's fabric, ensuring they outlived both the perpetrators and witnesses. These narratives, awash in vivid detail, offered lessons in morality and power dynamics. Medieval texts did not merely record, they wove tales emphasizing the punished's fall and the rightful authority of monarchs. Letters and accounts from those who stood among the crowd illustrate a society tightly knit by fear and awe. Whether with gasps of horror or uncomfortable cheers, the shared experience of witnessing this punishment bolstered communal consciousness against rebellion. The broader impact of these grisly executions lay in the social order they enforced. monarchs capitalized on them as propaganda, a stark reminder of the king's absolute supremacy. What occurred wasn't mere execution, but an assertion of dominance, securing loyalty amid political unrest. For the medieval mind, where the king and divine were intricately linked, such acts bore a profound significance. The monarch, acting as divine proxy, wielded life and death. These bloody ceremonies, moral theatre in their own right, broadcast the grave perils of disloyalty. More than mere punishment, they were warnings etched in gore, a chilling memory for any harbouring treasonous thoughts. Beneath the surface, execution rituals laid bare psychological warfare. The process was meticulous, crafted to sear dread into the public psyche. By showcasing the brutal price of betrayal, medieval rulers ensured not just compliance, but a mental adherence to order. This spectacle, shared by onlookers, became a collective lesson, embedding the ruler's power into the very ethos of living. For those grappling with notions of right and wrong, these events served as stark tests of allegiance, enhancing compliance through fear. While the royalty devised such measures, the church played its part, lending moral justification to the horror. Religious institutions which preached mercy and grace paradoxically sanctioned execution. They saw it as divine will, a necessary measure to purify the world and secure heavenly order. Clergy attending these grim ceremonies added a layer of sacred authority, transforming acts of cruelty into divine necessities. Public confessions and prayers underscored penitence, recasting punishment as a spiritual purification. In the gendered lens of medieval treason, women faced different fates, such as burning. Female treachery was deemed a special betrayal, an affront to the era's strict gender codes. Through disparate punishments, society underscored prevailing gender beliefs, with execution methods reflecting deep-seated perceptions of strength and vulnerability, each serving as a vivid testament to the era's view of gender roles and propriety. Through figures like William Wallace and Guy Fawkes, history remembers those subjected to this fate. Each execution became legend, imprinting tales of rebellion into cultural mythos. These events dramatized political realities, illustrating the dynamics between authority and insurrection. They were more than gruesome ends, they were turning points in history's narrative of power and dissent. The legacy of this punishment today echoes in our analysis of justice and human rights. As society reflects on how far legal systems have evolved, these acts invite broader contemplation of law's role in maintaining order and the ethical imperatives guiding contemporary systems. Though medieval brutality fades into history, its lesson endures, a cautionary tale reminding us to remain vigilant against repeating the sinister chapters of our past. In the echoing corridors of medieval Europe, justice took on a shape as complex and multifaceted as the era itself. To truly grasp the peculiarities of medieval justice is to step into a world where divine will interwove with the earthly, where each lash or flame was believed to echo the conscience of heaven. It was a time when pain was not merely punishment, but purification, a ritual meant to cleanse the soul as well as deter the body. Imagine the public squares, alive with the murmurs and shouts of crowds gathered not just for spectacle, but for a collective cleansing of their spiritual and moral realm. These events were theatre and sermon in one, where sinners were the actors, and the audience both spectators and participants in a grand moral play. Every shriek of agony was a reminder of sin's heavy toll, not just on the sinner, but on the community's spiritual health. The medieval mind saw suffering as a fire that could forge purity, with pain serving as the forge and the body its willing metal. The sight of a man or woman enduring such trials reinforced the social order, painting sin visibly in blood and screams for all to see. As the flames licked the flesh or the noose tightened, the onlookers were not merely passive, they were witnesses to a fundamental truth of their world. Justice, brutal as it was, held the promise of redemption not just for the punished, but for those who veered close to moral decay. The rituals of public shaming, though seemingly cruel, served to tighten the bonds of the community. Here, shame was not private humiliation, but a public reinforcement of shared values and norms. Picture the condemned, draped in ludicrous attire like the drunkard's cloak, facing the jeers and laughter of neighbours. Every mocking laugh was a boundary, anxiously carved into the social fabric, each taunt an agreement on what was acceptable and what was not. The power of communal ridicule was profound. It brought home the cost of breaching this unspoken social contract, cementing loyalties under the banner of mutual recognition of societal law. Fear played its part with equal severity in this tapestry of justice. Its touch was felt in the sting of the whip and the cold steel of the axe, but its roots lay deeper. The fear of public disgrace, of familial dishonour, often outweighed the physical pain of punishment itself. Like ghost stories told by firelight, tales of gruesome ends whispered via the grapevine, urging compliance and caution among potential offenders. In a society where fear cast long shadows, justice was a path well trodden, lined with cautionary tales that transcended generations. This legacy of fear, woven with the yarn of tradition, became as effective as any sword in maintaining order. Superstition chased the steps of medieval justice, offering unsettling explanations for misfortunes both great and small. In trials by ordeal, fire and water served not as mere elements, but as tools of divine judgment. It wasn't the human eye casting verdicts, but the hand of God, reaching through flames and rivers, answering human grievance with celestial decree. Superstition, like vines around a crumbling stone tower, wrapped itself tightly around the judicial process, with witches testified against by signs and whispers from the unseen. The belief in supernatural meddling turned justice into an act of faith, a solemn nod to the unseen forces at work. Yet amidst this harsh landscape, there emerged a notion of reformation through repentance. The concept of mending moral wrongs by public penitence was embraced with fervour. Picture acts of self-flagellation or bareheaded confession, sacrifices laid bare for all to see, offering a strange sense of relief to both sinner and society. Through their self-imposed suffering, the transgressors sought reconciliation with the divine and their fellow humans, a humbling journey to spiritual clarity. Wrapped in the cloak of vulnerability, they stood tall before their community, striving for pardon and proving that shared morality best functions in the light of absolution. Medieval justice bore the marks of its societal hierarchy, where the scale of punishment often tipped in favour of birth and wealth. Nobles might suffer disgrace or exile, a kinder fate compared to the brutal executions reserved for peasants. Yet even in their privilege, they could not distance themselves from the spectacle of punishment, reminders that divine justice did not recognise titles. This grim impartiality served as a thread stitching together the disparate walks of life into a single narrative, echoing the belief that in death, all were equal beneath the judgment of the divine. As history meandered towards the Renaissance, a shift in the philosophy of punishment ushered in new ways of thinking. Enlightenment peeled away the superstitions and cruelties that had long gripped justice, opening doors to human rights and individual dignity. Though the transition was gradual, It signalled a shift from the punitive to the rehabilitative, embedding in the fabric of time the potential for balance over brutality. Today's justice systems, though shaped by centuries, still reflect the echoes of yesteryears, reminding us of humanity's journey from chaos to order, from brutality to fairness. Thus, in peeling back the layers of medieval justice, we uncover narratives not of simple cruelty, but of a complex humanity grappling with its own moral compass. They are stories that linger in the peripheries of our understanding, hinting at our own evolution. Amidst the flickering shadows of history, medieval justice urges us to ponder the weighty blend of fear, faith, and fortitude that continues to weave through our understanding of law and order.